Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
Aseem and Janae, welcome to Next Economy Now.
Hi, Sean. Thank you for having us here.
Hey, Sean. Nice to be here.
Hey, great to have you. And would love to start by hearing about your background and how you got into the work you're doing today. And maybe we'll start with Aseem.
Thanks, Sean. So I used to be in high tech, but I always had a strong passion for environmental and social issues. While working in high tech, I always used to wonder what my path would need to be. And I was kind of more an armchair activist, you can say, writing letters to Congress folks or giving donations to organizations, but not actively involved in any environmental or social work. And then the Iraq War happened, which kind of galvanized a lot of people to take action. And I was one of those persons who got off the armchair and started to actually do something around the war, which was going to happen in Iraq. And that led to kind of thinking about, well, what can I do in terms of furthering my interest and passion in social and environmental issues? And that led to kind of thinking that maybe what was needed was education, because people were kind of misinformed when the Iraq War was happening. There was a lot of misinformation, which was on media, television, and people were believing a lot of that misinformation, which was being promoted and broadcasted. So in that respect, I thought that education was one of the things we could do. And I started to volunteer in an organization presenting documentaries on a lot of various issues related to human rights, peace, economy, media control, food control, and also a lot of issues related to poverty and environmentalism. And that led to, at some point, thinking that maybe it would be good to start World Centric as a nonprofit, because the organization I was volunteering at was kind of shutting down. They were on their last legs. So that kind of led to starting World Centric as an educational nonprofit to raise awareness of environmental and social issues.
Great. I love it. So let's hear from Janae, and then we'll kind of get to how World Centric has evolved from that origin. Janae, how about you? How did you get into this work?
Well, I've always loved the outdoors. I grew up in rural Northern California. I was really lucky to have the Marble Mountain Wilderness as my backyard. But I was the person Aseem is sort of talking about, largely unaware of global issues. It wasn't until I was in college in the early 2000s that I learned about climate change, and particularly how monoagriculture, mass livestock production was impacting the planet. And I became really interested and passionate about sustainable food systems, which led me to, for many years, doing marketing for a food co-op. And that's actually how I found out about World Centric. And at the time, I was also becoming more and more passionate about getting plastic waste out of landfills, reducing plastic waste in general. And so I started working at the company because I was really eager to be involved in that side, on the material side, but also thought the giving was really cool. Didn't know that much about it at the time, but through working at World Centric, I really became aware of how linked improved livelihoods are to climate change and vice versa. Sean, you actually were a consultant for World Centric back when I started, so you probably have seen a little bit of that trajectory of my career moving from marketing more into the giving side at World Centric. I very much grew up on the job, but feel very lucky to be in this role.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's been wonderful to see the company evolve, and so that kind of leads into this next question. So we heard the origin story of the nonprofit. Very happy to do this podcast with you all, because it's a story I often use when talking to teams about how you actually adapt a vision to actually meet the market demands and conditions. And certainly World Centric has changed a lot. So maybe Aseem, can you share that the arc of evolution from this nonprofit to feature documentaries and educate people to what World Centric is today?
as a nonprofit, I think one of the issues most nonprofits kind of face is how to raise funding to support the work they're doing. And it was no different for us. It was at that time, it was only me, and I needed to kind of raise some money to kind of pay for my bills, whether it's housing or food. And so instead of going the path of asking for donations and grants, I thought that it might be nice to have some kind of a business or some kind of a source of income which was coming from a sustainable source. And that led to kind of looking at a lot of different businesses or ideas which could provide a environmental or a social benefit to the community. And compostables at that time were just coming into the market. This was in 2004. And we became one of the first organizations or one of the first companies even in the US to start to promote and sell compostable products. And that kind of hit a nerve at that time with certain people who were looking for a better alternative to plastic and foam, which is out there and used for disposable products. And so that just had a website, and we were just basically order takers. And slowly that kind of business, or the business side, grew more and more to the fact that by 2009, we were spending, I would say, 90% or more of our time in supporting the business. And we're still doing some educational work in terms of presenting documentaries and doing some courses, but it was mostly supporting the business. So we chose to become a for-profit in 2009. And at that time, since we were moving away from direct kind of work related to education, we said, okay, well, at least let's give 25% of our profits to grassroots social and environmental organizations which are working on causes we hold important and dear to us. So that has continued to today. We became a B Corp in 2010 and a benefit corporation in 2013. And the business has just continued to grow, I would say, on a model which is just about organic growth. And there has been a lot of, in these years, there's also been a lot of awareness of plastic and pollution and just what's the impact on the environment and climate change. And that's all helped us to grow the business without going out and asking for money or going the private equity model, just organic growth. And that's where we are now. So an evolution which is not by design, but by just circumstances.
Well, yeah, and thanks for sharing that. And I would say by circumstances, but also there was an awareness and an adaptation there, right? You could have kind of hunkered down and said, "Oh, we're just doing the movie nights," and somebody else deal with the product order. Would also say that there's been maybe not the original impact of the education, but would you say there's been an impact due to the sheer volume of products that you've put into the marketplace that have displaced plastics? Or, how do you feel about that kind of core, the impact of the core business model that you now have?
Definitely. I think we are replacing a lot of plastic and foam, and many of our products have a lower kind of carbon footprint and carbon emissions, and they are coming from sustainable materials as well. So there's a lot of impact on the front end in terms of the materials we are using, and also on the back end, if our products do get composted, everything we do is compostable, that they are not kind of contributing to all the waste and pollution which exists today with our disposable kind of culture. So yeah, there is a lot of impact. And what I think has also, as part of this sales of products, is that we have that mission of giving 25%. And so we've been able to do, I think, a lot of good work with that 25%.
So maybe we'll hear from Janae. Janae, can you tell us more about the impact projects and your role and how that complements this kind of core business model that also creates some benefit?
Aseem shared that we really wanted to focus the giving on that intersection of the most vulnerable people in the world and impacts of a changing climate, environmental degradation. So since from the beginning, we've been funding grassroots organizations around the world that are focused on both access to basic human rights like clean water, sanitation, healthcare, education, while also focusing on financial inclusion. I think the giving has adapted a lot over the years. Aseem is sharing the story of the company's evolution, and the giving has also evolved right along with that. But I think what has not shifted is that dedication to environmental degradation and poverty alleviation, the combination of those two things.
So you've leveraged this kind of market opportunity, right, which is also displacing plastic, but then taking a significant portion of products and directing it to potentially even a more dire present need for populations.
Absolutely. And there can sometimes be a connection between the products themselves and our projects. One example would be we have a line of no tree products focused on, reducing reliance of fiber products on paper, trees, reducing deforestation. And that's something that we also address in our giving program, especially around supporting Indigenous people in protection of standing forests.
Yeah, I would love to just hear more, like, what are some other examples of projects that you've supported and also maybe impacts for the communities?
Yeah, I can do that. Maybe first I'll back up and talk a little bit about the program more in depth, which is that our focus is on helping communities that are experiencing poverty meet their basic needs, gain self-sufficiency, and have opportunities to thrive. And that's important for us because around the world, there's more than 600 million people living in extreme poverty. And we think that in order to break those cycles of poverty, you have to do holistic, multidimensional approaches. So when we're looking for partners, they tend to be community-led or community-based and have multiple approaches or interventions to solving both environmental and social issues within communities. I can provide a few specific examples. One I can start with is a partner that we have called Raising the Village. We've been partnering with them since about 2020, and they work in last mile communities in Uganda. Actually just had the chance this summer to go visit some of their work. It was so inspiring. They focus on removing immediate barriers to scarcity. So that's things I talked about already, like access to clean water, healthcare. And they also focus on creating income generation opportunities through agriculture and access to credit, and also building local capacity for sustainability, which goes into that priority that we have, that the funds that we're giving are going to make an impact for the long term. And the communities that RTV is working with are far below the poverty line. So the extreme poverty line established by the World Bank is $2.15 a day. That very first time that we funded RTV, we worked with them for about 10 villages in Western Uganda. And those villages, their baseline income level was just 43 cents a day. RTV works on a 24-month cycle. You could call it like a graduation program. And at the end of 24 months, those communities are over $2.36 a day. So an incredible increase of their income. And it's not just an increase of their income, there's these other transformative impacts to their lives because we focus on increasing crop value, which also means investing in soil, building healthy soil that can retain more water. They use a lot of permaculture design in their approach. And there's other social gains like women's empowerment, improved health. So it's really a whole package of benefit for communities.
So what I'm hearing is like one of the approaches for the giving is not just a donation or just a number of trees, for example, but really looking for integrated, holistic approaches that will actually uplift the community and change the quality of life.
Yes, and that are largely community-led. The people closest to the problem are best equipped to find the solution. If you want, I can give you another example of that. And I'm excited about this partner. We funded them for the first time just this last spring. They're called Akades, and they work in Malawi. They're a great example because they were started by two young Malawans, Mata and Hastings, and they themselves came from subsistence agriculture families, and they wanted to find a better way to improve their own lives, improve the lives of their neighbors. And so they created a program that helps equip farmers with modern skills for improving their crop production, also very much based in permaculture design, but also creating finance models so that these farmers have access to different types of inputs for their farming, and then linking them to the market so that there is a place where they can sell their goods. And they started out with themselves as farmers and a few other farmers, and now they're working with well over 1,000 farmers. So they've really grown this organization to create true impact in farmers' lives. Also, this very similar to RTV in terms of their income and their social well-being as well.
That sounds great. And I'm curious of, so Aseem, you talked about becoming a for-profit in 2009 but at that point choosing to give. I'm curious of like, what's some of the big numbers in terms of number of projects you supported and amount of money you've given? And then also like kind of what's been surprising, or what have you learned, or what has changed in terms of how you've structured that the learning journey there?
Yeah, I mean, I think Janae might be able to better answer the question because she has been intimately involved in a lot of the giving. But from my perspective, I think we have given a total of $13 million to date since 2009, and which is a fairly large amount for us anyways as an organization, and it has done, I think, a lot of good in terms of helping people's and actually saving lives, right? At the end of the day, is alleviating suffering, and suffering is a lot of it's physical suffering, which comes from lack of food or lack of clean water or lack of basic health care. And so a lot of this funding has gone towards that, and as well as protecting the environment, which we all rely on and depend on to meet our needs. In number of projects, Janae, do you think it's like about, I don't know, do you have a number on the total number of projects we might have supported?
Over 200 projects have been supported. But also it can be a little bit hard to quantify projects because we support a lot of ongoing programs. And so these programs aren't things where it's like you're going to build a school and then be gone. It's integrated work where they're going to stay in these communities for the long term. And so we say projects and programs. This last year, in our main grants program, we supported 20 nonprofits and 30 different programs.
And then in terms of the evolution, I think Janae kind of talked about it, like when we started, like when you start anything new, you don't know anything about it, right? You just kind of have to learn and kind of understand what are all the different ramifications and implications of how you're doing something. And so it was, I think at that point, it was more, we were funding kind of standalone things like solar panels or maybe just water filters. It was just one intervention which was being done, and we didn't kind of think about baselines or what the impact was, or we would just say, hey, we weren't even measuring if actually the number of water filters which were supposed to be put in place were actually put in place. Yeah? But that's kind of evolved over having some more rigorous analytics and data involved with our giving in terms of baselines, in terms of, Janae talked about the multidisciplinary kind of approach and not looking at only one factor, but looking at a combination of things which a community needs, and then moving towards a more community-led development model where the community is at the center of deciding what they need to do, and us, our kind of projects and programs empowering those community to make the right decisions they want to enrich their lives.
So yeah, at the beginning you would say, hey, here's some filters, right? Here's a solution. And now you've kind of evolved to like a relationship with the community, empowering them on some self-determination and planning, and then supporting them with gifts. And I think one of the things that you're doing also that's unique is supporting communities and organizations over time, right? Whereas a lot of philanthropic giving seems to have an ethic of spreading it around and not necessarily long-term funding for existing projects, right?
Yes, we really prioritize long-term partnerships. And I think similar to what Aseem is saying, Aseem, when I started in 2013, I'm not sure how much we gave that year, but I do remember, I think it was 2017 where we first celebrated like 1 million in 1 year, and that was incredible. But it shows like our giving over time, it has required more due diligence on our own part, more accountability on our own part to understand where those funds are going. And it has given us the opportunity with larger grants to have more deep and meaningful partnerships with these organizations and to really be able to understand and support their work in a new way, where when we were giving smaller grants, maybe that dynamic or relationship wasn't there.
Do you have another story for us, another example of a project that you funded?
Sure. I mean, we have 20 partners. We can just keep going down the list. Another one that I'm really excited about that we funded this year is an organization called Ofrenda Abuna. They're an indigenous-led organization in Colombia that has a really unique model. I think they're a great fit for World Centric because we're very committed to the belief that indigenous peoples are the best protectors of our most biodiverse places. And they're very effective at restoring land too. And so we've done a lot of indigenous land right works. And Ofrenda Abuna is unique because they're recovering Arahuaco ancestral land. This is in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta in Colombia. And they're doing this through buying their ancestral land back from campesinos who want to sell. And this is mostly land that has been deforested for agriculture, so it's facing its own degradation. Once the land is back into indigenous hands, they restore it and protect it, and they reserve 70% for just regrowth, and then 30% is for sustainable agriculture, also based on permaculture design or ancient indigenous design. It's really cool because they have satellite imagery over 10 or 12 years that's demonstrating the impact of these conservation efforts. And they showed a 63% increase in the forest cover once the land was back in indigenous hands. Ofrenda Abuna is the nonprofit organization that's been set up by an Arahuaco community called Sekun. And they set up this nonprofit to get funds from non-Indigenous people to help support these efforts. And so far, they've been able to purchase over 8,000 acres of their land, and they hope to purchase 5,000 more. And they're actively working with the campesinos to be buying. So people who are interested in supporting Indigenous conservation, this is something they can be investing in right now.
Wow, that's amazing that they're actually reclaiming their ancestral lands and then putting them back into their original stewardship. That's wonderful. So, Janae, how can people, the listeners, support some of your giving partners?
If you go to our website, there is an impact tab. You can find a list of all our current and past partners, and they can all use financial support. These are organizations who have gone through our own due diligence processes, have demonstrated impact. We can vouch for them all. We're happy to also talk to people who are interested in funding them if they want to hear our experience working with that organization. Of course, we can put them directly in touch. You can also go to their websites and donate directly.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I'd like to shift a little bit because we've talked about what kind of is often perceived as the impact of an organization, right? So your product or service, we talked about as disrupting plastic and that making an impact. And then, of course, you're funding this money to your impact projects, which is very kind of discrete and quantifiable and wonderful. But I'm curious about your, what I would call your operational impact, which means just you on your team doing these things. What types of practices do you have as an organization that might be impactful for the people that you work with, direct employees, and also maybe your supply chain partners as well?
I like to kind of answer this kind of in a broader sense, and maybe Janae can dive into the actual practices. I think one of the things I think about an organization is good for an organization is transparency, right? Are you transparent with the organization in terms of how it's doing, what are the decisions being made, and that kind of leads into communication as well. How open is the communication within the organization? We try to have not too many levels in terms of our management hierarchy. So we attempted to kind of have a flat organization at times, and it has kind of worked, but it hasn't worked. So but it's kind of some kind of I still believe that it's not a true kind of a hierarchical organization which we have, which leads to much more open communication between people, between across departments, and as well as kind of the transparency, which I think is good for people within the organization to know what's happening in the organization, whether it's our financials or the decisions which are being made, or why are the decisions being made as they're being made, and having input from like our CFT, which is a cross-functional team, is open to anyone in the company to come in and listen and give input. Some people choose to do, but most of the people don't choose to do, but for whatever reason. But it's open. It's open to the broader company to kind of voice their opinions on a biweekly basis if they need to. The other thing I think is, I'm a strong believer in integrity in whatever we do, and that is good not only for how we do our business, but also with all our stakeholders, which might be our suppliers, how we are dealing with them. Like we are again, transparency comes into play. Like, hey, we are not going to order from you because we have a lack of sales. So please adjust your kind of production capacity, or we're running into this pricing issue. So whatever it is, just being very transparent with our suppliers, being very ethical with how we are dealing with our customers as well. So I think that some of that is kind of the core of, I would think, that we're doing, which maybe is not innovative, but it's just part of kind of our culture as to how we want to kind of lead the company. Yeah.
Aseem, I appreciate that it might not be innovative to you, right? Because you have this sense of integrity, but certainly if we look at the tremendous inertia of the business as usual exploitation economy, those are not common practices, right? I agree that it makes sense, but your counter trend to the other bigger players in the space, of course. Janae, what would you add?
Aseem has said in the past that we straddle the nonprofit and the for-profit world. I think that builds a really unique culture, and it influences how we work together and the opportunities and even the benefits that our staff have. And I can say this, as a staff person, there's a few concrete examples. One is volunteer hours. Every employee has 40 hours of paid time that they can volunteer. There's other opportunities that I think are really unique. For example, each year we have a staff giving team. This is where we set aside $2,000 per employee. So that pool of funds gets to be over $150,000. And employees get to decide what to do with that money. And it really brings in ownership over our giving. And I think so many of our employees are passionate about that part of what we do. We also provide a lot of opportunities for connection, especially now that we are a mostly remote team. It's really important to keep our culture alive for people who want to participate in it, especially for education opportunities. That could be around how to do backyard composting, or it could be legislation that's coming along around plastic bans. And sometimes it's just for fun. Recently, we did a virtual trivia about the blue supermoon. So there's kind of the gamut of what people are interested in, how we can participate and have fun together, but also learn and hopefully continue to do what Aseem set out for us to do, which is lower our individual footprints, lower the company's footprint, and increase our positive impact in the world.
Oh, wonderful. Well, and I can share from my own experience working with literally hundreds of teams across the last decade. The World Centric team has a particular culture that is I'd say, incredibly hardworking, but also very passionate about the impact and the purpose that y'all are providing in the world. So I think you're definitely hitting a special balance, which is one of the reasons I wanted to invite you on the show to share the story. What else do you think is unique, or I guess maybe how do you feel this has impacted, maybe even just your staff in their personal lives? Like, have you seen people change habits and behaviors, or I'm just curious, like, what are some of the impacts that you've noticed over the years, and that might even be surprising, or that you didn't you hadn't originally anticipated?
I don't think we can speak for all our staff, but I can talk from my own personal experience, which is very early on at World Centric. We had a team lunch, and Aseem told us, hey, tomorrow when you get up, think about every plastic thing that you touch throughout your day. And, after 10 minutes, you can't keep track anymore. Everything is plastic in your entire life. And for me, that really changed the way I thought about my own buying habits. I thought I was already like a hippie and a conscious consumer. But working at World Centric, I feel like each year you learn something new, you become a little bit more dedicated. And I think a lot of our staff would say the same thing, that we do help with environmental awareness, and how we live our lives organically changes as we learn more about the issues that our world is facing and our role within that.
What Janae said is great. I think it's behavior change. I think is a very slow progress. Right? I mean, it's a slow moving train, or a bus, or a turtle, or whatever. Right? So I think, but because there is this kind of the culture or the environment or of kind of being more aware of kind of understanding that Janae does a great job of having our nonprofits come and speak to the team. She also kind of leads some eco-literacy workshops, and you and Kevin have presented a lot of eco-literacy in terms of environmental and social issues. So I think all that kind of builds on people kind of just being more aware of what's happening on the planet and how their actions impact the world around them. And I think that leads to behavior change, maybe in small ways, but it does lead to behavior change over time. Maybe you start being more careful about where your food comes from, or you, as Janae said, you start becoming more careful about the impact of your purchases, how sustainable are the materials, and what happens to them at the end of life. You become more conscious about where you're going for vacations and where you're staying. So I think it's all those small things which we do in our daily lives, which kind of slowly percolate and create some changes.
Also recognizing that our individual behaviors only take us so far. We need systems change. And I think World Centric has done a great job of also advocating for that. How do we not do business as usual? And what do we do about these huge oil companies that are out to take down the earth? We are so small in comparison. But I think that it's not just our individual activities, but how we fit into the system.
What's the connection to the name World Centric? And have you maybe invited a shift towards either your staff or people in general thinking or being a little more world centric?
I mean, as you know, Sean, I'm sure you know that the term comes from Ken Wilber, and he talks about the three kind of stages of consciousness, being egocentric or me-centric, and we spend pretty much all our lives or majority of our time being me-centric, because it's security, physical security, security of our loved ones, our own comfort, and that's where most of our time goes. And then we tend to also associate with kind of a larger kind of group of a larger identification with a larger group or an idea. And he calls it ethnocentric. I like to call it like more a belief centric or idea centric, because that's like, hey, I'm this nationality, or I'm this color, or I believe I'm a Democrat, or I'm a Republican, or I believe in immigration, or I'm against gun rights, whatever right is. So that's like an affiliation with a larger group of thing. And in some sense, that is what, there's a lot of conflict in the world because of that kind of association to this larger identity, which is more a belief system and a value system, but not rooted in kind of a larger consciousness, which is what Ken Wilber says, World Centric, which is kind of caring about the whole world, as if you wanted the whole world to be free of suffering. You want the whole world to be a kind of living and thriving, and not only humans, but everything which lives and flourishes on this planet. And so that's where the name comes from. We hope that we are, in some sense, trying to do that. Whatever work we do is in the effort to make this life and this world be one which can thrive and live.
Well, thank you for articulating that. And at least from my perspective, I can say that some of your impacts are world centric, right? This is wonderful. And as we move to close, I'm curious, maybe both what's next for World Centric, and then also, I don't know if you can kind of combine it, but like, what or who is inspiring you? So like, is there certain reference points that you're tracking that are calling you forward? How might that influence or be part of what you hope to continue to evolve your organization into?
One of the things we're doing right now, we're spending quite a bit of time in trying to see how we can innovate on materials and manufacturing processes. They kind of go hand in hand. So, and the reason for doing that is so that we can use more sustainable materials and as well be more price competitive in the market. Our products are good, but they tend to be a little bit more expensive than traditional plastics and foam. So if we can come to price parity or be even cheaper than those materials which are out there, then there's no reason that people will not adopt them. So, but those materials have a long history of being worked on, 40, 50 years and kind of fine-tuning the manufacturing process. So they're very, very efficiently made materials. So it's a huge challenge for us to see how we can get better materials and get to pricing which is more competitive, so that we can replace a lot more than we are doing now. And kind of that relates also to your second part of the question is, I'm always inspired by people who kind of are out there, right? Out there meaning they are kind of have reached a level of performance or a level of doing something. Whether you're an athlete, you're just like the best runner, or you're the best basketball player, or you're just the top musician, or you're the best educator. And I think that inspires me, because that means that it's possible if you put in a lot of effort and energy and focus to get there. And so I hope that as a World Centric, we can be one of the best companies out there, not only in terms of our products, but also in the way we run the company and what we do with giving and just who we are as a company.
Yeah, that inspiration of like seeing the excellence in humanity, and then kind of calling yourselves and your team forward to that standard. Janae, how would you answer that set of questions?
Well, for what's next, we are gearing up for our next round of grants, and so I think we will be looking at how can we continue to support our current partners, how could we increase our support of locally led partners, how can we be more strategic. We're always trying to improve. I think that's something across the line at World Centric is continuous improvement. So what's next is just to do what we're doing better. And what's inspiring me right now? That's a great question. I'm feeling very, very inspired right now by the people of Ecuador, especially indigenous nations. In August, nearly 60% of voters voted to prohibit oil drilling in Yasuni National Park. And this campaign was absolutely successful because of the relentless advocacy of frontline indigenous communities. And this is setting a precedent for the world. And the impact is very clear. The state oil companies have to take down 12 different oil platforms and remove over 200 wells. And it's a really big deal. And I hope people around the world will sort of celebrate this victory. And if you want to be influenced by one of my favorite influencers, you can check out the Instagram for Alex Lucitante. He's an Icofon indigenous activist, and he wrote a really, really beautiful song that was inspired by his experience while advocating for the Yasuni forests. So you can go check that out. It's really beautiful.
Oh, great. Yeah, well, we'll link it with the episode. And yeah, thanks for sharing that. And am I right that followed, maybe the precedent of that was acknowledging the rights of nature, like formally?
Yes. The people of Ecuador have had several victories in terms of rights of nature, indigenous land rights, but there is still a very long way to go. The economy of Ecuador is very much built on oil. And so while we celebrate these victories, there's still a long way to go ahead. And one of our partners, Amazon Frontlines, supports all indigenous-led organizations. So if listeners are interested, that's a great group to get funds directly to indigenous people doing this work.
Well, you two, anything else you'd like to offer our listeners as we close here?
I don't think so, but thank you, Sean. Thanks for inviting us. Thanks for all the great questions.
How can folks learn more about World Centric?
We have a website, worldcentric.com. There's lots of information there. Like I mentioned earlier, you can read about all our amazing partners. We also have a store if you want to purchase our products, try them out for yourselves. And I feel like a salesperson now. I'm like, you can find us in Whole Foods, your local co-op. But yeah, our products are out there in the world, but our partners are also there that you can support.
Thanks for sharing the discomfort of sounding like a salesperson. And maybe the last thing I'll say is one of the things I love about World Centric. Maybe Aseem, you'll remind me, how many years were you doing the giving program with zero marketing?
Yes.
Right? Like most companies, the giving program comes out of marketing.
Yeah.
Right? To make your brand look green or something. But World Centric was completely opposite and investing, however many millions in projects for years before actually having anybody on staff who was doing marketing at all. Right?
Yeah, that's true, because it's not a marketing thing, right? I mean, it's trying to make an impact, make a difference in the world. And I think that's the way it should be, or needs to be.
Yeah, this is a responsible way to live a life and a career.
Thanks,
and run a company. Yeah, well, thank you both. For your good
thank
work.
you for having us.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.